Hello, and thank you for joining College to Consulting. Today's class is Understanding Profitability. And I can't stress it enough, this is going to be one of the most important classes to really absorb and understand. And the reason why I say this is because profitability cases are the most common types of case you're going to get. Whether it be Bain, BCG, Accenture, Deloitte, it doesn't matter. You will most likely hit a profitability case if you are doing management consulting. Okay, so you probably remember this prompt. Why is company X losing profit and how can we fix it? Well, let's say you get the prompt and the interviewer reads this to you. When you say, can I take a minute? This is what you should be doing. You should be drawing out on a separate sheet of paper your framework. Okay? And remember, frameworks all have a macro level and a micro level view. So for the macro level view, we're going to look at the market. And under here, I'm going to write out the product to really understand that, the competition, market size, and market share. And remember, market size is just how much of something does the entire industry have, so money, consumers, etc. Market share is of that, how much do I have, or how much does company X have? Okay, now let's go to the macro level view. Here, because it's profit, we're going to look at the general equation of profit, which is revenue minus cost times volume. So first, we'll start off with revenue. Okay, so with revenue, we're going to look at different revenue streams, the change in revenue year over year. And then with cost, I'm going to write out that we're going to look at fixed costs, variable costs, change in costs year over year, as well as rank of costs. So now we can know which is the biggest cost. Now, with that, we also need to put in the last component, which is volume. So under volume, we can know what our profit margins are. Now, that means the most profit yielding product, and we can try to push that with more volume. Growth strategies, potential acquisitions, and ways to improve scale, cost savings, or the entire process. So if you remember this from before, this is a framework that was used to answer this profitability question. So I'm going to go more in depth as to why we're looking at these components to answer this type of case. Okay. Breakdown of profitability. Again, you should know this by heart. Profit equals revenue minus cost times volume. Okay? So let's look at revenue. What is revenue? Well, it's essentially money that is made, money that the company is getting. Now, revenue streams are different sources of revenue. So an example is Kraft Foods. Kraft Foods started off with just cheese, which most people know, but then they moved over to different types of cheese like Velveeta, Philadelphia cream cheese, as well as Jell-O and A1 steak sauce. So there's a bunch of different things that they own as well. But essentially, they have different revenue streams. So when you do this profitability case, you should try to understand for company X, what are all their sources of revenue and how are they differentiated for this company. Next is the change in revenue year over year. So this is the percentage change year over year. And the reason why this is important is because it shows the direction of performance. Is this company doing better than it did last year? That's all I can say with revenue. Is it doing better than it did last year or the year before? So what is the trend and growth rate of this company? Okay. So those are the two components that we look at for revenue. Next, we'll look at cost. So money that is spent or lost. Fixed costs are costs that are independent of the quantity produced. So what are some examples? Let's say that we're looking at company X again, and it's a generic company that you most likely see anywhere. Here are some examples of fixed costs. Rent, because they're independent of how much you produce. If you have a store, you still need to pay rent on that store, whether or not you actually sell anything. Salary is very similar in terms of, let's say you own a store and you have someone that you're paying $30,000 annual salary. You have to pay that person regardless if you make money or not. So that's what salary is. Machinery or capital. Machinery and capital essentially are the supplies that you need to make whatever you're making, and you need to buy these once or periodically to make what you need to make, but they're independent of how much quantity is actually produced. And another example is insurance. Insurance, again, is independent of how much you actually make, and you need to usually buy it regardless of how much is produced. That one's pretty easy. Variable costs. So variable costs are actually dependent on the quantity produced. Here are some examples. Ingredients. If you're making cakes, you need to buy more eggs or flour. Those are examples of variable costs. Wages. These are hourly. People who are paid hourly. So this does matter on how much you make, because if you make less, then you can scale back hours, which means you have to spend less on wages. Utilities. This is essentially, think of it like another ingredient. You need electricity and other forms to put into whatever you're making. And then delivery. Delivery are another form of variable cost, because the more you make, the more you have to deliver. Okay, that one's pretty easy. And we have percentage change year over year. This shows the direction of performance again. And now we can say that if costs are increasing, we know that from last year that either means we're making more or we're spending a lot more money. And the last one is rank of cost. So it shows the biggest cost and where there's most gain or reduction. This is very important to do, this rank of cost, because then you can see that fuel is very high, or wages are really high, or salaries are really high, and then you kind of know exactly where to pinpoint to reduce these costs when you have this profitability equation. Okay, and the last part is volume. This is the quantity of units sold or produced. So first thing is profit margin, the most margin per dollar of cost. Example is McDonald's with their supersize. So this is a very, very, very high profit margin product for McDonald's. Essentially is that fries and drinks and all that other stuff is actually really, really cheap to make. Think about a supersize of Coca-Cola versus a large. It's really just some carbonated water with some syrup. So it's not really that much money to make. But when you supersize it, people are not paying twice as much, but they're paying between 1 and 2 times as much, because they think they're getting a great discount, or they're getting a great deal on scale. So if the cost is already low but people are paying a lot more for it, this is a very high margin product. Okay, growth strategy are ways to increase the amounts of units sold. This is called organic growth. Okay, and we'll get into this much later with the growth class, but essentially just ways to get your product out there. Acquisitions, way to increase revenues that are not via the product. So buying other companies, such as Kraft, buying other small companies that make similar CPG type products. This is called inorganic growth. All right. Scale, way to lower costs while increasing production of units. So this is how to produce things on a massive level to make it more efficient, and that way you would reduce the amount of cost that's put into it. Okay, so we've gone over profit equals revenue minus cost times volume, and we've looked at the different components. So now, when you get this type of case, why is company X losing profit and how can we fix it? You should know how to draw out your framework ready. Start off with this framework. You should look at the macro level view again, which could be product, competition, market size, market share. Then you should know to look at revenues, revenue streams, change in revenue year over year, costs, and here we have fixed costs, variable costs, change in year over year, rank of costs, and volume. So we have profit margins, growth strategies, acquisitions, scale, cost saving, and process. Okay, so this is the framework that you should be using for any type of profitability case. And really try to understand this, because it will help you out in the future when you eventually get one of these cases. All right, thanks. I will see you in the next class.